Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 4 of Ignite. It has been a incredible week. We have seen and done so much stuff. I'm sitting here with Mr. Nicholas Blank,
Hello, good
Mr.
morning.
Chris Goosen,
Hello.
and the man that owns Exchange Transport. And for those who can't see, I am bowing.
Who would that be exactly? I'm Kevin Shaughnessy.
Yes, could you tell us more about yourself? and what you
Absolutely.
do?
So I'm Kevin Shaughnessy. I'm a program manager on the Exchange Transport team. I've been on the team pretty much since we started moving to the cloud. I guess it depends, 6 to 9 years ago, depending on where you decide to start that whole thing. Yeah, and I've been at Microsoft way longer than I like to admit because, my youthful demeanor would, suggest otherwise. Yeah, I started in Microsoft in 1991. I actually got started in the support organization for Word for Windows, and
Wow.
before that, pretty much out of college, I just want to say, hey, if anyone's a liberal arts major listening to this, do not believe the lies when people tell you you can't get a good-paying career with a liberal arts degree. Philosophy degree here. However, I will say it does help to know a recruiter at Microsoft or have gone to school with them. So make sure that you do that as part of your curriculum when you go to school. In '91, a lot of things were popping at Microsoft, and right before that, I was a broke graduate college student. I was actually delivering pizzas in downtown Seattle. Right before I got basically the call to come work at Microsoft, a good friend of mine, she said, "Why don't you come to Microsoft? What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Yeah, well, I'm going to be a musician at Seattle, man. That's what we all do, right?" So she's like, "No, come to Microsoft." So I'm like, "Okay." So called up the recruiter that I knew and said, "Hey, just get me an interview." And she's like, "Great, come on in." And I did the interview and took it from there and got hired. And it was a great time to be at Microsoft. It was a ton of fun. From there, moved on into product marketing for Office. The marketing guy said, "Hey, we really like what you do. We work with you a lot on the technical stuff. Come work for us." And so I did. And I was involved with the whole move in the internet. Front page was like a big thing back
Front
then.
Yes, it
page.
was.
Remember front page, right? The
I'm
democratization
I'm
of
sad
web.
about that.
Yeah.
Because I loved front page.
Yeah, it was just, now it's like I even think about like, geez, how am I going to build a web page? I can't even use Notepad now.
Yeah.
I've actually got to go build it and
Yeah.
like whatever. I don't even know now. It's like crazy, right? But that was a ton of fun being part of that. And then, then I left in 99 and took some time off, came back in 2004, got involved with speech recognition, which was really cool. And that was... we were kind of trying to deliver a speech server, a speech recognition server, where you would do basically everything that we're doing now with Siri or with Cortana and everything. It was all of that. In fact, all the technology that we were working on at the time is in Cortana now. But we were a little ahead of our time because each year was the year of speech, but yet it wasn't, right?
Yeah.
So it took decades to get to where we're at. But the cool thing about that experience was that's where I got to demo on stage with Bill Gates about 3 different times because he loved speech, and so it was kind of like a pet project for him. And I remember the first time when we went in to demonstrate this for him, and I had the speech server on the back end, and I'm remoting in, making sure everything is like working, all the wheels are turning and everything, and like right before I'm supposed to do this with Bill, we're in the room, there's like 4 other people, other demoers and stuff. It freezes.
Oh.
No.
It freezes.
Oh.
And my manager sitting next to me is like,
Uh-oh.
"Everything okay?" I'm fine. I just need to reboot the server. Literally, I had to reboot the server, right? I mean, it was brilliantly iconic. And, and Bill's like, "Okay, speech guy, go." And I'm like, could we have him just go? I got just a few more things to take care of, right? And so I'm like, but I'm so focused. I'm going to get this thing working, right? Get it up. He comes back. They finish up their bit, comes back, and I demo it, and it works brilliantly. And he's like, "Here, let me try that," And this was all the telephony-based stuff, right, at the time. And so he's like dialing in, and he's like talking to it, and he's like, a little smile on his face, and then we're done. And my manager later on, he's like, "You're pretty nervous." I'm like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, you had sweat like dripping." I'm like, I didn't really even notice it, right? But it was great. And after that, got on stage with Bill about 3 different times for all kinds of summits and stuff, and it all worked marvelously. And that was a real highlight.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's not a lot of folks get to say that. Well, okay, yeah, a lot of folks get to say that they demoed with Bill, but still, it was kind of fun and cool. So yeah,
That's
and then.
awesome.
Then later on, I moved over into security. I did analyst relations for a while because of the liberal arts major. Oh, everything's a little bit interesting. Let me look at this. Let me look at that. Oh, that's fun. So after product management, I moved over into analyst relations, worked with Gartner and Forrester and those guys. Talking about all the great things that we're doing in security, real strong push in security at that time, and then shortly after that, I worked a lot with what is now the EOP team or the information protection team in analyst relations, and then from that experience, I talked to one of my buddies who was the director of program management at the time in the group, Brett Tanzer, and I was like, Brett, I think it's time for me to move to program management. He's like, great, come on board. And so I moved over into program management and got on the exchange transport team and have been there ever since.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Wow. And what's fascinating about that is when you say transport, exchange transport, I think that means different things to different folks, right? So
Sure.
for those of us who have been working with exchange for a minute, we think about transport pipelines and just this crazy complex thing. But then for the people who have come into the industry in the last maybe 7 to 9 years, I guess, as you said, depending on how you slice it, transport is a little more hands-off for them, right? Because it just works. Yes.
But just because it is behind the scenes, the plumbing, if you will, of the service and just works, it doesn't mean that there's not innovation happening. You know what I mean? And so very curious to hear from you about some of the cool things that you guys have been sharing this week as far as, improvements, features, that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, we've got a session later this afternoon at 3:15, Office 365 email enhancements that'll help make your organization safe, smart, and secure. And
that is such an obtuse title.
I
When you see a title like that, that something's going to be announced that you can't put into the descriptions.
Yeah, yeah, we got a number of things. We've actually got about 7 different features that we're going to be talking about. Got a number of enhancements for end users. Some pretty cool things I think that people are going to be a little surprised about coming from the transport team. Because, to your point, when people think transport, they think the pipeline. And absolutely, we are the plumbing. We make mail move from one place to the next place. And both, internally within the Office 365 data centers and externally, sending mail out and whatnot. So there's a lot of innovation that we've been doing in the cloud from the pipeline perspective in terms of improving, the performance and improving, simplifying how we route the messages from one place to the next and, how we attribute things, et cetera. And of course, because we've got this pipeline, we're also being able to be sort of a signal bus for a lot of other applications as well. So we are also transmitting these different signals, say from Outlook calendaring to, the different folks to cache the calendar of the people that you work closely with, to cache their calendars, so that kind of snaps up, comes up really quickly and things. And we're handling all of that too. But we're also actually doing things that we're exposing to end users and to administrators. A couple years ago here at Ignite, we introduced what we call Mailflow Insights. And these are in the Security and Compliance Center. We've got a Mailflow dashboard, and you can go in and you can see these insights, which basically kind of, tell you about what's going on with your mail flow and takes maybe some different signals from different things, such as, let me give you an example. So, we can detect when your MX record is changed, and we can detect when mail flow to a particular domain has changed. The volume of it has changed, right? And we can now take those two signals and say, hey, look, it looks like you made a change to your MX record. And at the same time, did you happen to note that, mail flow to that domain for the MX record that you changed has dropped? Probably something misconfigured. You need to go take a look. Here's what it should look like. Here's the pattern for it. We can either, help you do that, or, here are the instructions to go do that. In some cases, we just have a button, fix it now type of thing, right? And so those are insights that we're able to provide and bring up, up the stack beyond just the plumbing. But we can do it by virtue of the plumbing that we're doing, right? Because every time we're introducing something at that level, usually there's some plumbing bits that we've got to work on and change, and maybe add some new properties to the message tracking log or whatever, to bring those to the fore. So that's the type of thing that we kind of are doing on a constant basis. But one of the other things that we've been doing as well is a lot of times new features. It's all about the shiny object. What's new in 2020? That type of thing. But there are so many different things where there are some annoying things that maybe Exchange and Outlook have been doing over the last 20 years or something, where it's like, yeah, it's not perfect, but it's okay. But gee, wouldn't it be great if it was actually better? Wouldn't it be great if Microsoft did something about it? Well, we kind of have this philosophy of like, there's a whole number of different things that we can improve on to make these things better. And we can do it now because the cloud empowers us to create some of these possibilities and build new features. Let me give you an example of one that we're going to talk about later today. The canonical message recall feature in Outlook. You all know it. You all, pray to the gods when you use it that it's actually going to work to a certain degree, right?
It's never worked for me.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, we have statistics that suggest that there is a success rate of about 40%, but that's
How many
not
of them use a Mac?
super high. Well, okay, there you go. See, and that's the point, right? Because it's very limited. It's got to be Outlook Windows, or Outlook desktop on Windows, and it's got to be, the sender, the recaller, they have to trigger it from Outlook, and the recipient also has to be running Outlook because it's on Windows, because it's client-based. Well, now because of the cloud, we're able to, because we're the transport pipeline and we can mess with whatever mail we want to, we can take and we can intercept that message recall message, and we can now act on the mailboxes in the cloud directly, and we can remove that message that's in the cloud mailbox, so that no matter what client you have, then when it syncs up, it doesn't have to be Outlook. It can be a down level, well, we call it a down level client like Thunderbird. It can be Outlook Mobile. Whatever client now syncs, it's gone, right? So just by virtue of that, we basically, our stats have shown that it's like, yeah, there's like 100% increase.
What's the logic
rate.
look like behind that? Because the first thing I think about is there a time limit? Right? So can I send a message and then recall the message 6 hours later?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you can, sure.
So, but then, like, what happens if somebody wants to keep the message? So what happens if I send it to someone and then that's a mail that like was really harsh and he now wants to report me to my HR guy, and then I go and I recall the message and it's gone?
If he's read it to know that he should report you to HR, we do not recall it and we will not recall it. Yeah.
So it can only be recalled if it's unread.
It cannot be recalled if it's unread. But that's the case that it is today, and it's been that way since 1997 when Outlook first introduced the feature. And about a day's worth of sitting in a dark room with our legal team has convinced me, okay, we will not touch that. We swear we'll leave that alone. If people have read the message, they consider that the ownership of the message at that point has changed.
Yes.
Now, I am going to go back, actually, because I've had some conversations with some folks around how does GDPR, the European standard for data protection and data rights, how does that change kind of that concept of ownership? And so there's some interesting discussions about that, because while philosophically I might agree and say, yeah, that kind of makes sense, there might be a case to be made that, at a future time, maybe there'll be a recall of something like that as well. No promises, but we are looking to see, okay, now that we've delivered, doubled the success rate just by the fact that all clients syncing will be able to, it'll be recalled for. What other incremental improvements can we make for the other reasons that it might not be recalled? And there are a few. There's an article up there, and that has been out there for a while, that talks about the different reasons, and we're eliminating some of those right now with this. But again, it's transport. We're in the cloud. We have that intelligence and that capability now to do that because we control that entire environment. So that's a benefit. And we're taking a number of different things that have been kind of, niggly issues over the years, and we're introducing enhancements or improvements or, just fixing those things. And so, so we're excited about that, but we're also then extending some of the capabilities that we have, in terms of the administrative details and how an Exchange admin works with our system to give them more knobs and dials, because moving to the cloud, it can be kind of a scary thing. I sometimes refer to the 5 stages of grief, right? The 5 stages of cloud grief. It's like, I've got to move to the cloud. No way, it won't work. The first stage is denial, right? And then you move through anger and depression and loss of meaning. What am I going to do? I don't own this stuff anymore,
I can't see the blinky lights.
Oh, no, exactly, right? Exactly, and that's a legitimate concern. And absolutely, especially earlier on, we didn't offer them a lot. Like I said, the last couple of years, we started to offer more knobs and dials, if you will, and more insights, more reporting and things. And I talk about how we're going to continue down that path, because it is a journey. And so we're expanding those capabilities and giving them more knobs and dials as well for the administrator. So, yeah, that's just kind of it at a high level. I don't want to, give away the whole thing. I want you to come to if you're here at Ignite, come to the session, or, go check out the session video later on.
Do you have the session code to hand?
Yeah, I think it's BRK 3312.
Okay, we'll confirm that, and just we could put that in the session notes too, just for anyone listening to this post event.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back to message recall just for a quick second here, and I guess just clarify, because this is all within the service, right? Presumably messages that break out of the service either to an on-premises, hybrid Exchange environment or some other third party, those are still going to be out of, the purview of message recall, right? You can't send someone who's on a Domino infrastructure somewhere else on the other side of the world a message and expect that that's still going to be recalled, because we're doing it within the transport stack, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, cool. I wanted to kind of, I guess, ask the question / make
Once
the clarification.
it's gone.
Once it's gone, it's gone,
Yeah.
right? So you got to make sure before you... So I actually, I have a teammate of mine, one of our senior program managers at my company. He has this thing, he has a rule in his Outlook where he delays send by 1 minute for everything he sends.
Yes, right. I call it the well, I can't really say that, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh no, the oh no rule, right? Yeah. That's
Quite
what I call
honestly,
it.
it's one of the smartest things. Now, I don't personally do it. There have been several times where I've gone, damn, I should have done that.
Yeah, right.
But I think
you
it's one of
can't
the...
do that on a Mac.
Yeah, that's probably also true. I haven't actually
You
even
cannot
tried.
do that on the Mac?
Yeah, you can't do that on Mac. It's
Yes, you can.
no, you
No
can't.
inbox rule
It's-
capabilities there?
well, you can't set up the rule with an Outlook for Mac.
Oh.
I've tried.
Really?
Well, the first time I saw this was like, oh, this could have saved my life a few times.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I was, oh, let me do that. No, it's not in my wizard. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Interesting.
I just discovered, I admit, I didn't know this until yesterday. Someone enlightened me that apparently you can do it with OA, Outlook on the web, aka OA. They call it, I think, delayed send. Of course, it's a standard descriptive statement because, the trademark police at Microsoft would be like, do not use anything fanciful like Zap or anything, because that would take dollars to, trademark across the world, right?
Right.
So anyway, they apparently have that. So.
I just feel like I think it's one of the smartest things you can do, right? Because inevitably, and I think Outlook over the years has gotten smarter at going, please see attachment in line or attachment to the email. And then when you click send, back in the day you needed an add-on to be able to do that. And Outlook kind of has gotten smarter to be able to figure that out. But inevitably you still say something either that you wish you hadn't, or for whatever reason you want to come back and attach stuff. So that's super smart. But very excited to see the new message recall feature in action.
Yeah, well, a lot of it's behind the scenes, so you don't get to see much.
Yeah.
But in addition to actually improving the recall itself, one of the other annoying things about message recall is that right now, all kudos to my Outlook colleagues, in a good way, that what will happen is for each recipient, you'll get a single email notification back telling you whether it failed or succeeded for them. And that's not bad if you got 10.
Mm-hmm.
But if you get more than 10, now you've got all these different individual emails, and you're just looking for those top 5 people that you care most about, oh no, I need to know about them.
Yeah.
And it's very unwieldy. And so one of the things that Transport, a plumbing team, is doing is we built a report that basically is an aggregate report that just kind of shows you, hey, here are all the people for whom it's recalled, here here for whom it's pending, and here's for whom it's failed that you need to go grovel to. And right now we're kind of going through a bunch of naming conventions for like, well, what do we say in the details? Like, oh, you're totally screwed, buddy. For each one of these guys, right? Yeah, you're really host.
Do
right?
a lookup, an org lookup to see whether that
That's
person
right.
is
That's right.
subordinate
Yeah,
or not.
CVP, and then you're toast, man. You better start checking your resume.
The owner, what? Yeah, fair enough. I think that's, again, it just speaks to the fact that innovation continues to happen even for stuff that is really seen as plumbing, right?
Yeah.
So that's super exciting. Anything else that you can share with us around new features or functionality?
Before we go down new features, I have a question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about numbers? So the numbers in cloud are often staggering.
Oh,
People don't appreciate
Yeah.
the. And coming back to transport, and when we were still building Exchange servers on premises, the kind of mail volume that we could handle on premises was staggering. Large customers or even small customers having a medium-sized customer who would process several million messages a day was pretty normal, because Exchange was just so good at doing it. So what can you tell us about what happens in cloud in terms of volume and numbers?
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that because I tend to remember the numbers like when we started more than the numbers now, because the numbers now are just like, yeah, whatever, it's another billion. It's like the McDonald's sign, 30 billion served type of thing at that point. But I remember about 8 years ago when we on a monthly basis, I would deliver to our vice president, Rajesh Jha at the time, and still is for the overall organization for entertainment, or for the E&D, Entertainment and Devices group. No, not entertainment. What's the E stand for? I can't remember.
Enterprise?
Enterprise, thank you. Of course it's enterprise.
Enterprise Entertainment, it's pretty close.
Yeah, I was going to say, right? I was like, that can't be right. But anyway, we used to go, oh, we hit a milestone. We did 500,000 messages this month, for yay. And when we hit 1 million, it was like, wow, and it took us like a year to get there or whatever. But now it's just like, that's like what, every minute practically. I mean, I can't tell you the exact numbers, and I apologize, I don't have that. But, I'll look it up and you can write it in or whatever in the notes. But it's billions, like 20, 30 billion or something like that.
A day.
It's just astronomical, really. I mean, and the thing about it is that everything is designed in such a way that it doesn't, we are basically we just add more servers now, right? I mean, that's all we're doing in terms of to be able to handle the scale. And so it doesn't, we're optimizing. We continue, the teams are doing incredible work to just continue to get the most out of each and every machine, and still make sure that it's performant. But, we just keep adding more machines, and everything just scales lovingly. So we, end up going into the data center, and now we've got where we used to have 2 or 3 different data forests that we used to log into to do things. Now it's 50, 60, and it doesn't matter because they're all basically the same, which is fantastic, right? So the volumes are really astronomical, and they actually provide us a lot of things that help to empower new capabilities as well. One of the things is that I was thinking about was, because of that scale, and that we're able to sort of get the telemetry for massive numbers of companies who are doing things. One of the things that we've recognized is there's a phenomenon called the reply all mailstorm.
Yes.
And the reply all mailstorm, I tell the story, and I don't want to give it all away, but I tell the story of Bedlam DL3 from 1997 in my session later today. And basically, that was kind of like the first big reply all mailstorm where somebody says, hey, I don't want to be on this DL anymore, or take me off of this, whatever. And other people start chiming in, yeah, take me off too, I don't want to be on it. And yeah, me too. And then, other people start chiming in, the heroes start chiming in saying, hey, don't be sending mail like that. It's going to take down the service or something like that, right? And of course they use reply all mail just like everybody else does to do it,
yes.
right?
Yep.
And it just cascades, and, it ends up being problematic potentially for organizations. And back in '97, it took down the exchange for Microsoft, basically, right? And mail was down for hours for the whole day, even if you weren't on that DL. So it was like 195 gigabytes of data generated in an hour. It was, 16 million, I think, messages generated in an hour. So that pretty much was like, wow, the first big reply all mailstorm. It hit the press and the papers, and everybody knew about it. And, Exchange did a bunch of things at the time to help mitigate those things in the future. But where we come now to the present is, so while there had been some things like sender permissions, DL sender permissions, and recipient limits that were introduced back then, those certainly help to mitigate. But they do require some people, to go in and do some settings and whatnot. So people are still running into reply all mailstorms. And now, because of the scale of the service, we can detect that. We can detect, oh, look, these different organizations, yeah, that's a reply all mailstorm, certainly, just by the pattern of the mail distribution over time, and we can see it, kind of accelerate, and grow like over an hour, and then it kind of diminishes. And then as the sun turns and it's a large organization, they usually have someone else in another country where we see it come up again, right? So we've been able to detect these patterns and be able to assess and say, look, let's do something about this. So we can take those patterns that we've detected, kind of bake them into a feature that we call reply all storm protection. And when we detect that a reply all storm is likely happening, we will, or about to, we'll put a kibosh on it, basically not allow people to reply all anymore, and we'll send them an NDR saying, don't use reply all. Come on, people, right? Basically, yeah. At the end of the day. And that'll be temporary, like a couple hours worth. Cool down period, because humans are humans. It's like an itch you got to scratch. You can't help but do a reply all, and people are not going to change, right?
Yep.
So let's help them, help themselves in the organization. And so that's another thing. But again, that's something that we're doing. Long-standing issue, but now we have new capabilities, new possibilities that are being empowered by the cloud, and let's take advantage of that and start taking care of some of these things,
Yeah.
Kind of wiping them off the plate.
So for anyone listening who doesn't or isn't familiar with the Bedlam DL3 story, it's very well written up on Tech Community at the moment. I will put a link in the show notes, because it's, when you read that, it's I find it fascinating. I was just reading it just recently again, because we had a situation at our company where something like that happened. Some intern sent an email to, inadvertently sent it to a very large bunch of DLs, and everyone on the DLs were like, well, I don't need, and as you said, right, the higher up the chain the replies come from, those folks are also doing a reply all to say, please don't do the reply all. So I had to set up an inbox rule to just go anything with that subject, just shove it in. I have a folder in my inbox now called Storm with like thousands of emails in it, just because I needed to just clear up the garbage, right? So I definitely want to make sure. I'm going to put that a link up in the show notes to that. It's fascinating.
It's amazing that it can still happen.
Yes.
Can you tell us about AI? It's the year of AI.
I've heard of AI. Those the acronym is known to me, but what is AI at heart? So can I tell you about AI? Well, certainly, yeah. All throughout Microsoft, AI and machine learning is certainly something that's being looked at for how it can drive innovation and how it can drive more productivity and things for businesses and throughout all of our offerings. So in AI, because we are a platform, the transport team being platform, we are taking a look at different types of AI capability. So, for example, even when I talk about reply all storm protection, right? This is a journey. We're starting very relatively simply with some basic pattern recognition for what we're doing here. But we expect that we will expand on that using some, machine learning and AI capabilities to better detect those patterns more intelligently than what we'll do to start. So I think what we're doing is great, and it's going to add some significant value, but certainly AI is something that we're looking at, not only for features, of course, but also for intelligently, optimizing our routing capabilities throughout the service in particular. Can't really talk much about, what any more specifically than that, but absolutely AI is something that, is weaving its way throughout the heart and blood of the service in a lot of different ways.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I look forward to kind of seeing more or hearing more about that in future, because I
You
think
bet.
being able to take, I mean, at the end of the day, too, Microsoft has such a massive amount of signals, right, from that coming out of the
Exactly.
service from all sorts of things, and I'm sure there's stuff that potentially could be harnessed today that y'all haven't even thought about harnessing, right? So the journey on this is going to be very fascinating for years to come.
Yeah, there is a very significant strategic in our organization for Exchange. There's a very strategic move to develop this. You might call it a signal bus, right?
Right.
Where we do have exactly what you're saying, right? There are all these different signals, and I had alluded to some of them earlier when I talked about the Mailflow insights, right? So there are all these potential signals that are traveling through this bus, this information bus, and now it's a matter of how do we take AI, for example, and start correlating some of these different signals in interesting and intelligent ways to offer, to either automate processes and responses, to things when they do occur for an organization's email or, calendaring or whatever it may be. But there's this strategic push. And we are part of that team. I mean, we're transport, but we're part of that kind of information bus team. So it's being built. We're kind of figuring out exactly how this is all going to work, and things are starting to come together where a lot of different folks throughout the team are building upon that and starting to develop new things. And we're going to definitely be doing more of that too. So yeah. I think you're right on.
Slightly out there question, but given the plumbing nature, right, of transport, are you guys referred to as Exchange Transport, or is it just transport? Because this, transport really is being used by every service every workload in the service at the moment.
Yeah, it's interesting because we are internally, we just call ourselves the transport team, Exchange Transport, Exchange Online Transport, Office 365 Transport. There's a term we refer to as, substrate. And so, we're substrate transport, So at the end of the day, we just kind of go by transport.
Gotcha.
But to your point, that pipeline is providing, kind of the circulatory system for all kinds of signals, that are percolating throughout that substrate information bus. And so we're largely responsible for keeping that flowing and making sure that those signals can get exposed appropriately in the different endpoints available to the different teams to build on.
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, Warren alluded to this yesterday. We were talking about the fact that just almost everything sends an email these days, right?
Yeah.
So
everything sends an email.
Yeah.
There's a number you mentioned yesterday, Warren. So interrupt you.
what?
150 million
150 million what?
people.
People. Yes. 150 million people. Yes. On Office 365.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the things that we take for granted because they just work
Yeah.
actually enables 150 million people.
Yeah. Millions of mailboxes in
But
the
I think
cloud.
the scary thing is how it runs, right? I mean, so that's billions of emails, right? Billions a day.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you have to think about how many servers that is, right? So obviously you've got different layers to transport, right? So you've got your SMTP piece, and then you've got your antivirus piece, and then you've got your routing piece, and all those bits and pieces. Then you've got the indexing piece or the storage piece or whatever the case may be. Is how do they all work together? Do you know what I'm saying? And then how often does something go wrong? And how long does it take to apply a new feature and let it go? Those are the types of questions that, excite me. It's like, how often do you roll out an update? It's like once every 3 weeks.
That's just it with the service, right? I mean, it's very different than the on-prem world, of course, where everything would roll up, according to a set schedule, once, every 6 months at best in terms of a patch or something like that. But now there's a new update going out every day. Practically, right?
Every day.
I mean, it doesn't mean that every team has piled onto that particular build.
No, sure.
Right.
Understood,
But and when I say every day, I mean that's probably not exactly correct in terms of new updates, but on a weekly basis, there's definitely a new set of updates that are rolling out, a new build that's rolling out every week, which, on the one hand is great because it makes for very agile, flexible, fast deployment of new features, because that's really what we're trying to get to. But of course the challenge of that is, like, how do you do that in a way that you don't destabilize the system every time you go out there, or potentially destabilize it.
Yeah.
So, and I think the service maturity over those last 8-9 years or so, we've come a long way towards finding that right balance between destabilization, between potentially destabilizing the system and adding new features. And when we do, and when one of the things we bake in is like, hey, look, we're not going to be able to know every time ahead of time that there's a risk of something happening. So we have to use that in and of itself as part of the deployment, and quality assurance or testing procedure. So we have a system of rings, right? And so, the first ring goes out to a much smaller group of people, those of us who are on Exchange, on the Exchange team, right? The dog food ring, if you will. And then after that ring, it rolls out to, to MSIT, the Microsoft internal, and then it rolls out to another ring. So we have these multiple rings, and the notion is that each ring affords an opportunity to find a bug. And what's great about it is that we usually do. Before we reach the ring that starts going out to customers, a good 90+% of the time, we will find most things. Those of us who actually, each of the engineering teams, we end up going on call like 24/7, if you will, where if something goes wrong in the service, our monitors, our alerts, pop up, they page us, right? And it used to be great because Rajesh Jha's voice, our CVP, he used to come on and go, this is an emergency, of the Exchange Online service. You're responsible to go fix this. And when you hear Rajesh say something like that, you're like, oh my gosh, okay, all right, I'm getting there, right? So you'll pop up and take care of that. But usually, oftentimes, when something goes wrong, it's in those inner rings before it hits customers.
Yeah.
And we go take it, and sometimes we'll have to say stop a build, right? And roll that build back, get the fix in, and go out. So that has improved tremendously, and it's improved the reliability of the service with minimal impact overall, I think, to customers. So, again, the service maturity, we've been doing this quite a while now, and we're getting there, and there's still improvements, but it's come a long way. And that's part of how we're able to handle that large scale, right?
It still boggles my mind because, imagine what the data center looks like. All those thousands of servers. How do you know which one's causing the problem?
Eject the CD-ROM and walk down the rack. Nick and I worked on a project together 15 odd years ago, and this particular customer had an underground data center that it was just miles of just the same white HP server, right? And inevitably, the servers get mislabeled, or the labels of the servers fall off.
I know which story.
You remember that? So you'd end up going, okay, well, we have to replace a drive on the server. No, well, that happened, right? And so the way that we would resolve that problem is you'd get someone to walk up and down the rack, and you'd eject the CD-ROM.
Yes.
And then you'd be like, find the server with the ejected CD-ROM. And then then you knew.
Because they never had those lights. The UID lights.
No, well, back then, no, probably not. So, anyway,
that's cool.
Also, the answer to your wider question about how this all integrates is 3 days with Brian Reed.
Yes. 3 days with Brian Reed.
And that's where we learned how amazing transport is. We just take it for granted, right? Port 25, TCP 25, RFC 82, 821, stuff just works, right? The stuff that's under the hood, the things like shadow transport as part of a DAG set, how DAGs bug check themselves or blue screen themselves in order to take themselves out of rotation based on instability. Bare metal hardware, the 9-disk configuration, and the stuff just works.
And there's a lot to be said about the preferred architecture in that instance, right?
Well, that's what comes from.
There's a reason for the preferred architecture, and I see very few customers building on-premises environments these days, but inevitably those ones who are just don't get it or ignore the PA because they feel like some vendor that sells virtualization software or hardware or whatever has told them, something else, right? And it's a very difficult conversation to be like, look, at the end of the day, who are you going to trust? The guy trying to sell you something, or the software vendor that you've invested in, and who runs this at the scale of 150 million, right?
It's a lot.
Yeah.
That's insane.
So we coming up towards the top of the show. We'd like to ask you, how would you like to be found on socials
Do
if
you
people
want to
want to
be
reach
found?
out to you? Yeah, and there's always an option, right? If you don't want to be found, but if you've got a Twitter or LinkedIn
Yeah.
or even direct email address that you'd like to communicate, home address, bank details, we'll take all of those.
Sure, I'll do that. Yeah, absolutely, no problem.
Or if there's a feedback loop or anything that, if the listeners can do to get in
email
touch.
I think is fine. I'm on LinkedIn and on Twitter. My LinkedIn is pretty obfuscated, though. I don't think I have a picture up there yet. So similar with Twitter. Yeah, I don't, right? I'm so horribly photogenic. I don't really understand, why I don't just grab, from the vast array of photos that I have of myself, scrolling through. Is there one? No, I can't find one. Forget it, man. I'm just like, So yeah, I don't have that, but email really is probably the best, and easy enough. Most Microsoft, the pattern is kevin.shaughnessy@microsoft.com. That's probably the easiest to remember, or kevinsha@microsoft.com. Yeah, and I'm totally open to that. That works fine for me. Because honestly, I'm an email guy. I don't really spend a lot of time on social. I was just telling one of my colleagues who's like, well, that information I did put up on our Teams channel, and more power to Teams. Think they're doing great stuff. I love it. But I'm like, I'm still kind of an email guy. So sorry. Can you send me an email?
Yeah, you're a purist.
A
purist.
Yep.
It's not the first time we've heard that one out of the Exchange team.
I'll say
just
there
a
are
quick stat. I'm sorry. Real quick stat. I just want to say that the rumors of the death of email have been greatly exaggerated. 62% of businesses and professionals in some recent research that I was looking at say they still prefer email for their business communications. And delivered emails, the volume is expected to grow about 18% in the next 3 years. Yeah, I just don't think it's going anywhere soon. It's going to be around, and I love it. It's it's what captivated me when I first came to Microsoft was email. That was when I first discovered email, and it's like, this is brilliant, And then different people were like, yeah, you really need to tone down a little bit, about your over-enthusiasm of email.
I'm there. I mean, I've been working in email for 20 years. I see that there's the change in workforce, is going to bring about different ways of working. But I very much feel like it's like with the old postal system, right? The postal system's still around. Yes, the reason for it being around is a little different to where it originally started.
Right. It's an Amazon delivery mechanism.
Correct.
It's substrate.
No, but
that's right.
But I feel like that's kind of, I myself, I'm a massive fan of email. I always have been, and I can't imagine a day where I don't use email on a daily basis. Do you know what I mean? It just doesn't. Yeah. I know there are a lot of people who are saying, "Oh, I work exclusively in Teams now." Like, do you really? You receive a meeting request for something that's going to come through email, or things like that. So
I think so.
The second question is, what would you like to plug? Is there an aka.ms? Is there something on Docs that you like to call out, or tech community?
Oh, good question. Nothing really pops to mind other than because we're going to be talking about the blog post, the ELO, our blog. That's actually probably the best because actually that's where the most refreshed and fresh information is posted, and there's a ton of great stuff up there, including a blog post that I just that's going out live today that talks about the different features that we're showcasing in our session today. So ELO, I can't remember the URL. I'm horrible about that sort of thing. I apologize, but just look for EHLO. You had me at EHLO. Yeah. An old reference that a lot of my colleagues nowadays have no clue what that's about. Yeah. And I can't believe how many people I'm having to tell that story to about what that refers to. I'm like, man, I'm getting old,
Well, at least we're not doing Squeaky Lobster again.
Oh, my God. Absolutely. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah. That was awesome.
Thank you.